Today is day 4 of the February 95 7-day retreat in Springwater. Yesterday we didn't get to that question which has popped up a lot about how can I take something home, or particularly a quiet state of mind, or a quieting or quietening state of mind, one of greater openness and therefore some seeing of what goes on in oneself, in each other. Of course, when one notices the beauty of a quieting mind, more in touch with inside, outside, maybe even no difference, no separation between inside and outside. More mellowness and maybe even an emerging affection for each other, taking the place of habitual self-hatred or self and other hatred or negativity. Of course, one wants to preserve this and sustain it, keep it going, have it at home, in the family, at work. Wondering here whether this is possible to realize something similar at home. Although it's usually put as, can I take it with me? It's amazing how we put things and then influence ourselves, our thinking and our perception by the way we put things. And another thing comes up right now, which someone said. It's such a wonderful thing to hear that there may possibly be something beyond all this identity stuff which I call myself. There's a real inspirational feeling, or feeling of joy, thinking there may be something else. So one can notice right here and now how a thought like this, maybe there is something beyond the humdrum of my existence, the drabness, the conflict, the friction, pain, ambition, constant restlessness. Maybe there is something beyond that, and that thought, that hope, has an instant effect on the body. It's felt as pleasurable energy. So to not only revel in the thought and the pleasurable feelings, but learn something about what's going on. That positive thoughts have a pleasant effect on the body. And then wanting to continue that pleasure. This is also a given for this body-mind, the addictiveness of it. Wanting more of the same that feels good, and seeking out through memory and all kinds of thinking and figuring out devices, seeking out what gave pleasure to happen again, at least in fantasy. But I'm not saying that's all there is to hearing that there may be something beyond this reflex system which I call myself and society. It sort of rings true somewhere, doesn't it? If it didn't ring true somewhere, maybe we wouldn't even hear someone say it. It wouldn't hit us. And maybe it is, in fact, that somewhere we know that this is so. Non-verbally. Not just by what we've read and heard and the inspiration that comes from it. Let's not put it as a statement. Let's keep it as a question. Is there something that rings true? Is there somewhere, somehow, that we know that we're not just this complex system of conditioned responses and reactions and reflexes and hurt and aggression and guilt and having to do things while not liking them and not being able to do what we would like. And this is what can be touched in a silent retreat, sitting quietly, walking, living together, quietly, alone and together. There can be a contact, a touching with that what? How not just to make it into more words. An inner-outer silence, quietness that permeates spaciously, non-personally, freely. And when that is there, manifests, as it were, then there is no enclosure into me-ness, I-ness, separation. That is not there. So there is no question of taking this home. It's there. Who is the taker? And what is home? What gets in the way? What gets in the way of the light? Of the sunlight? It's the clouds. We can study it, find it out very first-hand. It's all bright and shiny and clear, and then suddenly it gets dark gray and a cloud or cloud cover has spread across the sky. So what are the clouds? What is the cloud cover? Can that become a sustained question with us? What is going on right now that so fogs up or confuses the body-mind, keeps it entangled, distorted? What is going on? Just to stop and ask a simple question. I said stop and ask, because stopping goes with asking a simple question. Stopping what's going on habitually, reflexly, responding out of habit, stopping for a moment, wondering what is going on. If there is no stopping, whatever habits are running are running. But asking what is running, what is happening, is also stopping. It's just like walking along together someplace, taking a walk together through the woods. Suddenly some strange sound, eerie, or one hasn't heard it before. And one we'll say to each other, what was that? And instinctively, or whatever attribute one will give to it, we'll stop and say, wait, shh, let's listen. Because we can't just keep on walking and talking animatedly about what happened yesterday and at the same time listen to what's happening now. We know that we need to stop and listen to find out what's happening right now. And in a case like in this example, we remind each other of it. If we're not walking with someone, but walking alone, we will also stop and listen and look. And is that tied to a retreat center? This wondering what is going on, stopping, quieting down out of necessity. It is a clear necessity that unless there is some quieting down of what is going on as an activity, there can't be observation. And I'm hesitating for a moment because we often say, be quiet or start listening in the midst of the agitation. But still something has happened. There was a moment of attention or some coming to, wondering what is going on. And then if there's a strong current maintaining the agitation, the upset, it'll continue. And yet one wants to find out about it. So there's a stopping and continuing and stopping and continuing. And stopping again and listening, maybe taking some time out if one can. Or at night before going to sleep, sitting down with this, still with the flavor, the ring of this turbulence. Maybe it's in full force, maybe it has abated, but one wants to find out what happened to me. What was going on? Maybe the office is not the place to take time out. Maybe it is. There's always a bathroom to go to. Close the door and be quiet for a moment. Let all the turbulent vibrations be heard and felt and seen. And have that questionnaire, what is going on? Without meddling, just openly wondering. Is that tied to a week of silent retreat? Or is that something that can take place anywhere? If the urge is there to find out what hides the sunlight, and what is the quality of the clouds, what is it all about? How do I get involved in all of the things I do? At the moment of deep involvement, there's no awareness. But when the question is strong and repeated, time and time again, how did I get into this? Or why do I get so entangled in activity, in ambition, in fear, in wanting? Then there will be the energy and the strength and the time, long or short, to give some attention to it. Obviously, one cannot exactly repeat in one's work week or family week all the components of a silent retreat. That's why we have these things, because they are so hard to come by in one's daily life. But the sun is always there behind the clouds, or the other end of the earth, while it turns away from it. It's always there. Quietness and space, without any feeling of isolation or separation, is always there. It's not tied to any place, to anything. It's free, independent or non-dependent on anything. And why don't we come upon it more often? This is the nagging question for most people who are concerned with this, at least for periods of time. Well, let it nag, let it be there bothering. Because it does something, such a nagging question. It generates interest and energy to look. To look without knowing, and therefore openly. At any one moment, this is possible. Because direct insight into what is happening, that is the miraculous thing about it. Direct insight into what is happening right now does not take time. It's instant. And then usually covered over by not even wanting to see, being afraid. So many people tell me this. There's a real deep fear about just being here. Just this instant of being here, sitting, breathing, fan moving. Because as we're talking about it and maybe feeling the legs, the heat, the warmth for the floor or the mat, the brightness on the eyelids, sensations throughout the body. Maybe it's not scary. Is it scary? Is it? Let's look for a moment. Is it scary to be here? With all there is, not knowing whether it will last. Is it scary? Or is the reporting about it scary? Because when people tell me, I'm really scared, I'm not so sure whether it isn't the idea of being there in the moment without anything, without defense and protection, without self-image. That idea is scary. The actuality may not be. One has to find out. Or a moment of that and no fear, and then the thought coming up, well, what am I now? Have I lost my identity? Am I no longer a free chooser? And it's scary, these thoughts, as we said at the opening of the talk, to watch how thoughts affect the system instantly. Pleasurably, painfully, angrily, fearfully. So it may not be so much that these moments don't occur in which there is just presence, but that thought is so powerful in saying, don't do that, that's dangerous. Because thought wants to keep functioning and figuring things out and predicting and knowing and arranging and reacting. That's its nature. evolved over millennia. So maybe not so much trusting the thoughts that tell us how things are about us, about the world, about each other, but rather wonder whether it is really so. Are thoughts telling us the truth? We firmly believe and assume that yes, they do. They tell me the truth about how things are. All I need to do, whatever that I is to choose what to do and what not to do. And this is how we talk and relate to each other and think and assume. And here on this sunny, snowy hillside, there is an opportunity to question these assumptions. What is this I? We've been asking since day one. And yesterday in several discussions, one-on-one and in groups, there came up this thing of choosing. And there's such an attachment to this assumption that I am the chooser, I have freedom to choose, that one doesn't even want to hear that it could be questioned. So can one question this attachment? And whether it's true, what one believes? Not saying yes, I am, or no, I'm not, but find out. What is it all about this choice that's so deeply ingrained in us? Socially, religiously, politically. It's a holy cow that I have free choice. To do what? What I like? It doesn't hold up as we begin to examine it, but each one has to examine for herself, himself. No one can do it for another. There can be talk about it, and one may hear what seems a very radical view expressed. One may fight it, but one can also investigate oneself. What do I mean when I say I'm choosing? And where does the chooser live? If he, she exists, must have a location. You may point to the head and say it's in here, just as a thinker is believed to live somewhere in the head. Thinker producing thoughts. And yet one finds in a retreat like this, thoughts are all over the place, and then one wishes they weren't. One wishes one could choose to turn them off. And it doesn't work. The more one tries, the more thoughts are generated in the trying, in the anger, frustration. So in observing what happens and for the time being, putting aside all the assumptions, may reveal things quite clearly about how it goes. Thoughts wandering time and time again to pleasurable scenarios or to fearful ones. What will happen in the future? What happened in the past? No one doing it. It's going on. There's a magnetic force, or like a magnetic force of remembered pleasure and pain attracting the thinking process. To do something about it, to get rid of it, or to repeat it, perpetuate it, or figure things out about it. And is anybody intending to do it? Or does the idea, I intended to do this, come way later, way after this whole process is already set in motion of thinking about things? And then in retrospect saying, well, I decided to think about it. This has actually been experimented upon, someone wanting to find out more about intention, asking the subjects while they had a connection to what's it called, encephalograph, studying the brain waves. Long before the subject says, I have this intention, there has already been activity, brain activity. That makes sense. If one keeps watching how ex post facto we think we meant to do things or wanted to do things, and it is just sort of wedging itself into a process that's running quite automatically. And I'm not saying all this for people to buy it, to be convinced of it. It comes out of observation here. I may not observe right, so let's discuss it if you see it differently. But be open to really look, not just verbally, pronounce things. We've done this all our life. And everybody around us does it too. And there's an opportunity and a possibility to really look what we're doing, not just say this is what we're doing, say this is what is going on, but examine it. And that needs a quiet kind of attention and energy, which we may not want to give. Depending on where we are, when we're here, it fits nicely. At home, do we want to give this quiet energy and attention to what happened during the day or what just happened a moment ago in an argument with the wife, the husband, the boss? Or do we already know what happened? We know what he's like and what I have to take from him or her. It's such a beautiful freedom to suspend the assumptions, put them aside and question freshly what really happened. And disidentify. Is it possible to disidentify from me, from my idea of myself, and to notice how hard it is, how much I'm clinging to the idea of myself, wanting to preserve it at all cost, and smiling at it, wondering about all this energy being put into maintaining what? What are we maintaining when we're defensive? Don't want to look. Want to know what was the cause and why this happened. What are we maintaining? Yesterday, in one of the group meetings, one person said, I've noticed that practically all I think about is myself. Can one say that? Has one observed that? And what was added was, I don't like what I see. Because there's the image. I'm not just all self-concern. And yet in observing and questioning, this is what reveals itself. So, will one spend energy to defend the image or let it go? It's false. It's not true. Why maintain it and keep repairing it? And keep getting hurt over what people tell me I am, selfish. And the quality of seeing that all the thoughts revolve around myself is that quality of seeing transparent, non-partisan, open, just light. Not heavy, light. This is how it is. Not identified with what one sees, because what reveals itself is what goes on in human beings the world over. With which I'm not saying that it is absolutely necessary to only think about oneself, that it's impossible to think otherwise, but one observes. And what is one discovering? Not to make a formula out of it. Now I know, I don't have to observe anymore. I know I'm thinking about myself all the time. It's quite a different and miraculous thing to discover something directly. Because that seeing is not of the same system of thinking and reacting habitually. It's a totally different quality about it. Often hard to discern because thought immediately takes it over and makes it into a story about me. Good me, bad me. So the same with what was said earlier, not to change one's thinking into, well, so I don't have any choice, so there is no chooser, but to watch, what do I mean when I say I'm choosing or I chose this? What really happened? When we find memory is not there enough to bring it all back. But we feel we have to make choices, and we do make choices, putting it conventionally all the time. So what goes into it? Choosing to come a retreat, choosing to walk instead of taking a rest, to get a cup of tea, to sit down, or to come back in the sitting room. What goes on? Not what should go on, it's such a fine line, but what is going on? One may find one can't observe it, it's so opaque. Things just sort of seem to happen. Or does one discern some thoughts? It would be nice to go in there, more people are sitting in there. Maybe I should join them or watch it. I don't want to suggest it. It'll become clearer and clearer as the energy gathers to look out of the curiosity to find out what is true, not what is conventional. And if certain discoveries about quote unquote myself bring a discomfort, anguish, uncertainty, watch it. It's all right to stay with it. The conventional thing is to run away from it into something that is non-disturbing, comforting, secure. Temporarily produced by thinking, most of the time. Or, of course, one can eat or drink. I'm not saying when there's uncertainty or anguish, don't eat or drink, or don't take a walk. But it happens while one has time to sit, to explore it, or walk with it. It comes right along. Or else, amazingly, it vanishes as one climbs up the hillside into the woods, looking at the distant hills, so rosy. Because now there's more in touchness with what's there, and the thoughts lose their strength and power and leave the organism alone for a while, so it can recuperate in a hike. It's amazing how a fearful state may totally disappear in going outside, looking at the clouds and trees and these amazing birds, smelling the wet earth and seeing the new green under the snow. There's such immediacy to it that it will just wipe out the thoughts about myself, at least for moments at a time. So also that way do we learn about the nature of fear and what keeps it going and what ends it. Being here completely? Or does the thought about it start it again? We came to that. It's a frightening thought, someone said. Don't trust the thoughts. Trust just simply being here. It doesn't even need any trust. It works on its own. We will end here for today.